Vielen herzlichen Dank, Peter. The floor is open. Bitte ganz laut die Frage stellen. Die Dame.
Ich werde vielleicht auf Englisch antworten. So.
Yes, please do. Feel free.
My name is Kristina Tsvetanova, and I'm proud to drop out my education together with my co-founders, and we built the most successful social enterprise in Europe. So I would like to take the opportunity and ask you a very simple question. If you have only one simple tool to give more than 314 million blind people the chance to have education, would you do it?
It sounds too good to be true, but yes, I would do that. Es klingt zu gut, wahr zu sein, aber wenn es stimmen würde, ganz bestimmt.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for this great talk. Your German level is excellent. I just, since we're talking about contrarian ideas, we're talking about technology and education tonight. What is your view? Is the internet and the technology wave actually making us smarter? Are we, as a collective, gaining more wisdom, or is the internet dumbing us down?
Well, I'm obviously very, very biased on that, and so certainly my general bias is that the technologies are more good than bad, but it's not. I don't think it's absolutely uniform. I think there certainly are aspects of the forms that the technology take where we have not yet fully figured out how to perfectly utilize them. And so with so even though I think the internet's made us, let me just start by saying it's made us more productive, but only somewhat more productive. So email is a very different way to communicate, but people end up spending hours a day on email, and so I think it's made us a little bit more productive, but not quite as much as might be desirable. And then I think the forms in which knowledge get transmitted are very different. So you get very fast feedback. Ideas you can communicate extremely quickly and efficiently, and that's very valuable. Perhaps there are some concerns where often ideas can be shot down a little bit too quickly. So if you have an idea and 20 people tell you, oh, that's probably a dumb idea, you might not pursue that. And in a pre-internet world, you might have spent more time on seemingly wrong ideas, and then sometimes those things would work out better. So I think it is complicated, even though I certainly think it's more of a positive than a negative. One of the ways a lot of these social and political debates about the internet always get framed are, this company's not solving all these problems. And so we have this critique of Twitter on our front page at our venture capital fund, and said they promised us flying cars, and all we got was 140 characters. And so, but it's not Twitter's job to build flying cars, and it's not. Twitter has done a very good job as a company that specifically developed a new form of communication technology. And I think the internet itself has been generally a good thing. The problem is really much more that there are many other domains of technology where there's not been as much progress, and so that's what I would always like us to be spending more time on as a society.
Thank you, the lady.
Thank you. I liked your statement about the developed world and our perception of being already there and the need to keep innovating. I'm wondering, you is coming to Europe, to Vienna. Do you feel like we are the developed world?
These are all very dangerous questions, I suspect. Sehr gefährliche Fragen. Look, I think people exaggerate the differences between the United States and Western Europe. There certainly is something very dynamic about what's happening in Silicon Valley. I think there are many other parts of the United States where there also is a general sense of slow economic growth, stagnation, that things are not changing that much from one generation to the next. And there is a question. I think Silicon Valley has created a lot of value for the world, but it's probably not enough even to improve the overall living standards in the state of California. And so you have this very weird dynamic even within the state of California. So I think that yes, I think there always are questions. How can people copy Silicon Valley a bit more here in Europe? And those are very hard questions to answer, because it's again hard to say why Silicon Valley even works. It's just it's again a one of a kind thing. It's hard to do if you just have one thing that works, hard to know why. But I think this problem of stagnation is a problem across the developed world. It is not at all limited to Europe. And we have relatively slow growth rates. We have a world of 0% interest rates across the entire developed world.
The young man there.
Hi, Peter. It's an honor to be here. Peter? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Forgive me if I sound a little bit too nervous, but I truly am. And I read your book. It was truly amazing. And what you said in your book was, like, how you said it, that the next Zuckerberg will not build the next Facebook, and etc., etc. What character traits can you suggest to, if you can build them, for upcoming entrepreneurs? Because companies are led by people and are run by people, and people like to buy from people, not from companies. For example, like Steve Jobs, he developed this persona where when everybody thinks of an Apple, he thinks of Steve Jobs.
Yes. Well, this is always a very important, but possibly very misleading question about what's the character of the founders. And so, just like you shouldn't copy Steve Jobs in terms of building an iPhone. Okay. I also would say that you should probably not copy Steve Jobs in terms of always wearing a black sweater. And so there obviously are, you have a lot of people who dress up in T-shirts when they're starting technology companies. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't. I don't think any of these things necessarily mean that much. I would say 10 years ago, I was sort of very fixated on this question: what were the characters of the founders and things like that. And I think it's often somewhat misleading. And what I've often found to be a more constructive set of questions to talk about is what is the nature of their idea? What is their business strategy? What is the substance of their technological innovation? And that good founders are sort of linked to good ideas or good business plans. And if you have a good business plan and a good idea, you probably have a good founder. If you don't have those things, not so clear. And so I would be very skeptical of investing in people who claim to be very good founders, have no ideas, and say we're just going to lock ourselves in a room till we think of something. That's probably not quite what works. I would say the one sort of a question that I found to be very helpful in asking people is that, and this is where it's very different from an academic or even a professional career, which are simply individualistic. And when you start a business, it's often a team of people that have to work together well. And so I find the prehistory questions to be very good ones to ask. If you have 2 or 3 people, where did you meet? How long have you known each other? If the answer is, we met at a business networking function in Vienna a week ago, and we both wanted to start a company, that's a bad sign. Okay, that's like I got married to the first person I met at a slot machine in Las Vegas. You might hit the jackpot, but it's probably a very bad idea. And the good answers are things like, we've been friends for 3 or 4 years, and one of us is more on the technical side, one's more on the business side, and so I think the team dynamics are one set of things I try to systematically focus on.
I'm Antonella May-Pochler from the Boston Consulting Group. So thank you very much for a great inspiration and for the great book. I think that we all agree that without going more from 0 to 1, we won't have progress also in the developed world and also here in Europe. But we have economies and we have incentives that normally bring management to do a lot of one, to do globalization, to extend ideas across the globe. So if you were a politician, and I'm sure that you are happy not to be a politician, particularly nowadays here in Europe, what would be the 3 things that you would recommend to do to create better prerequisites to have more 0 to 1 happening here? And also to resolve some of the issues, some of the pressing issues that we need to resolve nowadays. And I think we don't need to list them because we know that we have a lot of issues on the plate.
Well, I think if I spent too much time in politics, I would be endlessly frustrated because it seems so incredibly hard to do things. And this is why I think that in our time, government and politics has in some ways become a reactionary force. It's something that's holding our societies generally back. In a democratic society, you need to get a majority. You have to convince a majority to do something new. If most people are kind of comfortable and don't really want to change anything, that's very hard to get innovation done by political means. So I tend to think the best hope is to keep politics out of it as much as possible. There have been points in history where the government was heavily involved and actually, built things, in one way or another. You had the space program in the U.S., things like that. I think our political institutions function much less well than they did even 50 or 60 years ago. And so we can expect far less from them today than we could have 50 or 60 years ago. So my major answer would be, a negative one. And that politics is mainly, again, this force that's slowing things down. And I would say it's not just politics in governments, it's also politics in big companies. Because one of the questions is, why should you ever start a new company? Because there's always an argument when you have a bigger company, it has more resources, it has talented people, it has more capital, it has longer time horizons, that everything should just be done in a big company. And I think the challenges often end up being, when I started PayPal in 1998, one of the objections was, obviously this could be done by a bank, and bank will have far more resources to push this, so this just can't be that good an idea because a bank will just do it. I didn't have that good an answer at the time, but I think the dynamic would be that if you were in a bank and you tried to do this, you again run into the social, political problem where people would say, that's too weird, that's too different, why are we putting resources into this very strange project, and you end up with all this sort of coordination that stops things. And so you start new companies because that's the only way to get things done. You don't start companies for the sake of becoming an entrepreneur. One of my friends I was talking to years ago, I asked him, what do you want to be doing in 5-10 years? And he said, I want to be an entrepreneur. That is a terrible answer, okay? That's like saying I want to be famous or something like this, you have to be, you're probably a little bit out of your mind to start a company. It's always a lot of crazy things that are involved with this. You start a new business because problems cannot be solved within existing structures, whether they're governmental or the large corporate structures or the large nonprofit structures. And that's why we need to start new things, because the politics in these large existing structures, both governmental and private sector, tend to be very deeply broken.
One more question here and then one last.
Okay, hello. My name is Wolfgang Matzner from TeleTrader. I have just a very short question. Do you think, or what is your opinion, shall big banks shall big banks fear startups in the FinTech era, like number 26, or should they see it as an opportunity?
It's very hard to say anything sort of categorical around that. I've invested in a lot of FinTech-related companies in recent years. You do have in banking, there's always an enormous advantage to scale. And so this is the big challenge for any FinTech startup, is it's very hard to get to scale. And then at the same time, you often have these very deep political challenges where it's extremely hard to do anything innovative in a large bank. And so my general approach, the hard question I always ask FinTech startups is, where's the technology? Or is it just a marketing tool where you're selling things on the internet and it's not really much of a technology? And I'd say a lot of FinTech companies, not so much tech at all. But if there is some specific technology and then you can figure out a way to distribute it and scale it, that can be very powerful and very dangerous to the larger banks, I would think. One of the things, though, I would say is I don't think this is ever, a pure zero-sum game. And if you start a company, your goal is never to destroy a big company. Your goal is to build a successful company. And so, one of the buzzwords in Silicon Valley that I really dislike is disruption. that you have to disrupt things. And the disruptive people look for attention and they find it, although it's normally attention in a sort of negative way. One of my friends, Sean Parker, started a company called Napster, which set out to destroy the music industry. It was going to be a disruptive company. And the name itself sounded like disruptive. You nap some music, you nap a child, you're a kidnapper. So it had sort of that dark name. And then within about they got on the front pages of all these magazines, and a year later, the company was shut down. They did succeed in disrupting the music industry in many ways, but they didn't actually succeed in building a new business. And so I think, for the most part, the goal is to do new things. Occasionally, there's some disruption that happens as a side effect, but that's never the goal when you're starting a new business. PayPal was seen as very disruptive to Visa and MasterCard. At the end of the day, Visa and MasterCard are vastly bigger today than they were in 1998. Visa and MasterCard were disruptive to something like Western Union, which is a 19th century company, and even that's still growing. So I think there sort of are many paths where it's not a zero-sum world.
Peter, when you met Mark and gave him a $500,000 check as a first outside investor for Facebook, how sure you were that he will become the 8th largest company in the world with over $300 billion in market cap?
Well, I don't think there's any certainty of that at all. But look, the company, there were a lot of very promising signs. They had the only thing they needed the money for was to buy more computers because there was so much demand for the product, and I think that that's a very unusual fact pattern. But if you ever find a company where they only need the money to buy computers to meet the demand for the product, that's always a really good sign.
Are you taking one more question?
Sure, we'll do the last one.
Okay, last question.
Well, Mr. Thiel, as a student who gets taught to think very linear and straight in school, do you think it's possible to kind of actively learn to think in a controversial, in a out-of-the-box way? And if yes, how would you recommend to train yourself to think in these ways?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a again, I'm not sure there's a straightforward formula for trying to think creatively or anything like that. It can't simply be attaching a minus sign to what other people say. So it can't simply be everybody says that 1 + 1 = 2, and so I'm going to say that 1 + 1 is not equal to 2. So attaching a minus sign to conventional wisdom is generally a bad idea, because most of the ideas that people generally agree on are actually true. And so I think what I found to often be very good is often to be substantively really interested in a subject or some combination of subjects that people aren't paying that much attention to, and I think that's often where really creative ideas come out of. It's not the sort of thing where people go into an empty room with a whiteboard and say, we're going to lock the door until we come up with some new ideas. That sort of a formula generally does not work.
Well, thank you. A warm applause to Peter.
Thank you very much.
Stay here, please.